There's something oddly satisfying about watching chaos unfold, as long as you're the one causing it. And in Pinball Storm, Lokanta, chaos is the name of the game. This isn't your typical roguelike, and it definitely isn't your typical shooter. Instead of guns or swords, your primary weapon is marbles. But not just any marbles. We're talking elemental, explosive, hyper-bouncing spheres of pure mayhem that turn every battle into a pinball war zone. You play as Jory, a rebel in a city that's completely swallowed by corruption. Lokanta, or more specifically, Lonkata, is an ultra-capitalist metropolis where the line between industry and tyranny no longer exists. The ruling force? A machine-like plutocracy pumping out armies of enemies, region by region. And you, one lone wanderer with a strange connection to an ancient legend, are the only one willing to stand against them. The moment-to-moment gameplay is built around marble shooting mechanics. You launch your marbles across a battlefield filled with enemies, walls, traps, and power-ups. These marbles ricochet off surfaces, bounce off foes, and trigger effects depending on their elemental type. Fire ignites, ice slows, lightning chains, and so on. It feels like a mix between a physics puzzle, a bullet hell shooter, and a chaotic arcade machine that just happens to fight back. But this isn't mindless marble flinging. Pinball Storm is all about synergy. Every marble has unique properties, and as you progress, you'll unlock more than 20 different marbles, from basic fireballs to explosive orbs that split on impact. You're not just shooting randomly, you're building a loadout. Some marbles heal you, some deal more damage after bouncing, some trigger effects on every enemy they hit. With over 100 upgrades, the combinations are nearly endless, and no two runs ever feel the same. What really hooks you is the loop. Every wave you clear earns resources. Every fight is an opportunity to stack upgrades and lean into a specific strategy. Want to go all in on status effects? Stack Ignite and Bleed. Prefer survivability? Build around the Regan marble and companions who buff your HP. Or maybe you're the kind of player who just wants explosions everywhere, in which case, you're covered too. You're not entirely on your own either. Along the way, you meet companions who appear through special encounters. They're not just flavor, they bring new marble types with them, tied to small story beats or challenges. You'll get a glimpse into their backstories, but more importantly, they'll shake up your playstyle. Some companions unlock marbles that scale with kill streaks, others give you passive buffs that open up new builds entirely. The relationships are brief, but meaningful. They help give shape to your run. Then there's Diting, a mythical helper that acts as your trump card. As you land hits and rack up kills, your energy bar fills. Once it's maxed out, you can summon Diting to rebounce every marble currently on the field. It's a game changer. Use it at the right moment, and it can clear an entire wave in one go. Mistime it, and it might just ricochet your marbles into a wall and leave you exposed. Timing matters. So does positioning. Pinball Storm forces you to think 2 or 3 moves ahead and rewards you when you do. And the bosses? They're no joke. Each region is capped by a warden boss, complete with distinct attack patterns, environmental hazards, and resistances. Some will flood the map with minions, others will shift the battlefield layout entirely. The key to surviving these encounters is adaptability. If you're stubbornly using fire marbles on a flame-immune boss, you're gonna have a bad time. But if you've got a diverse loadout and you're watching their patterns, you'll find the rhythm. And once you do, every boss takedown feels earned. On the story side, there's an ongoing mystery rooted in the lore of Lonkata. A legend known as 6 Lights Befall, Sukhavati approaches is woven throughout your journey. It's cryptic at first, but slowly unfolds as you progress. There's also She, a mysterious figure tied to both the city's downfall and your own strange connection to the marble powers. And while the narrative doesn't overshadow the gameplay, it does add a layer of intrigue that pushes you to keep exploring. Visually, the game balances charm and clarity. There's a lot happening on screen. Marbles bouncing, enemies moving, numbers flying, but it never feels overwhelming. The art direction leans into bright, energetic colors with a slight dystopian edge. It's clean, readable, and packed with just enough flair to keep things visually fresh from zone to zone. What makes Pinball Storm Lokanta so compelling is how it embraces its weirdness. It doesn't follow the same path as most roguelikes. It doesn't need to. Instead, it builds something strange and satisfying around a simple concept. Bounce a marble and see what happens. The result is a game that's easy to pick up, hard to master, and endlessly rewarding for those willing to dig into its systems. So whether you're here for the physics-based chaos, the strategic marble builds, or just to see what kind of nonsense a pinball roguelike can really cook up, Pinball Storm, Lokanta delivers. It's quirky, it's sharp, and it's probably unlike anything you've played this year.